Hello, and welcome to Feedback, episode 37. Today we are joined by composer Michael Gordon and scholar, producer, curator Argeo Ascani. And we're so happy that you're both here today. And we're going to be talking about a really fantastic piece that Michael wrote for us several years back called Material, which we had the great pleasure of premiering at Miller Theater at Columbia University. So to all of those of you watching today, don't forget you can submit questions ahead of time for every episode by sending those to feedback@yarnwire.org, or join us in the live chat, whether it's on YouTube, Facebook, and you can submit questions in real time. So send them our way. We'll try to get to them if we can. So with that, we're really excited that you're both here to chat with us today, and I'll turn it over to you, Argeo.
Thanks, Laura, and hello to everyone, both at home and in studios and in your own homes, I suppose, as well. I wanted to start off a little bit talking about why Yarnwire chose Michael Gordon for this commission and sort of how the whole piece came about in general.
Yeah, I think we all liked Michael's music and wanted to work with him on a new piece. So, I mean, that's the way most of our commissioning, collaboration, partnerships began, with review of people's music. And at Miller, we saw a kind of great opportunity to produce this piece, and the rest is history.
I think there was also, like, it's right in, you're like, of course we would choose Michael, it's like, we love his music. But I remember I think the beginning of our discussions about doing stuff came around the time, maybe that timbre, we started hearing timbre and rushes, right. And like this kind of, that music was like so impactful, I think, and like really exciting. And as we were thinking of new people to work with, I think after hearing those pieces, Ian, did you come up with me to see the Rushes? Anyway,
the Rushes premiere at Impact.
Yeah. That was really fun, and I think all of that stuff like together was really, really pushed our need for working with Michael.
And so, can you walk me through a little bit, like, so you're a 2-piano, 2-percussion group, and you sort of approach a composer and you say, okay, we're a 2-piano, 2-percussion group. And then is the conversation, would you write us a piece, or would you write us a 2-piano, 2-percussion piece? Like, is there a specificity to it? And the reason I'm asking for those of you at home is this piece is scored for actually just one piano with 4 players playing around it in sort of varying roles and in different ways, which we'll get into in a minute. But sort of when you walk into it, are you expecting a piece that actually uses 2 physical pianos, or is there no expectation?
I think by this time, whenever we go ahead, Laura.
This awkward Zoom. Who's going to answer first?
Yeah.
No, yeah, I think it really depends. At various times, in our history, we have sort of maybe not required, but gently nudged or encouraged composers in certain directions. Like we've talked about, when we were starting out with our commissions, we did actually specifically ask composers to think about writing for piano 4 hands instead of 2 pianos. And I would say at this point, we typically don't tend to put that sort of limit. We just say, do what the piece needs, and we'll take it from there.
And Michael, so Yarnwire approaches you and ask you to write this piece, and then does your mind immediately go to, I'm going to write a piece for one piano as opposed to two pianos, or how does the process of getting from the asked in the commission to the actual manifestation of the idea in your head?
I'm not sure. Maybe we could all kind of remember this. I know that I went to, you're in the Yarnwire studio right now. And so I know that I met all four members of Yarnwire in the studio a whole bunch of times, right? And I don't know if it was from the first meeting, whether it was like, this is for one piano, or we just started experimenting. And I think it was just like, let's start. What I remember is, let's start having fun and playing. And this idea of just using one piano evolved. Is that right? Do I have that right?
That's how I remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember you were, Michael, particularly interested in all the possible extended techniques inside the piano. And I think, since then, Ning and I have expanded our arsenal even more, but we already had a pretty big one. And we had, I think I tried to find it, actually, I could not find. We had maybe hours of videos that you had made of us doing various techniques and trying. And I think that maybe was one of the big, sort of sparks in what ended up being the instrumentation in the end.
Yeah, I have those videos somewhere. I keep all that stuff. The piece, this for me, I think they're sometimes you write, sometimes I start to work on a piece and I go, okay, I know how to do this, but the situation I find myself in a lot, and I like to put myself in, is, I don't know how to do this. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where I'm going. This was particularly challenging because, for one thing, we never had the 9-foot, we kept talking about this imaginary 9-foot Steinway D that only showed up at the very end of this process.
Yeah.
And notating, I think even today, I don't even know, it wouldn't be that easy to do another performance right now. I think everyone had little scraps of paper and all kinds of cheat sheets, and there were we were really, it really felt like we were kind of exploring and kind of looking at the stars and writing down our location and trying to, how do we do that, how do we remember that, how do you notate that, how do we, so it was really a lot of exploration, and we spent a lot of time together, right? We were in your studio quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think a lot more, no pun intended, but a lot more material, like musical material, was created than what made it into the final version, certainly. So,
in that process, that, like, for us, in a way, when you ask us to try something, we're trying it, and hearing it for the first time, and these sounds are out of context, and then we move to another thing, and then we jam, and we're like, oh, we have this idea, blah, blah, blah. And that whole process was really, really cool, I thought, because, there were like chunks of ideas that we would come back to, and you had worked them into some other part. And then finally, when we got into Miller Theater, and the staging was set, then stuff really, like, it started making sense and fusing. And, that was really satisfying, I think, from a performance standpoint. But I think we might have to rebuild the whole thing again if we played it again, like you said.
And so, Michael, you go into the studio with Yarnwire and you hear, sort of this collection of sounds that they're able to produce. And at some point in the process, I would assume that a correlation triggers in your brain. And I'm specifically referencing your program note which sort of makes reference to a pile driver heard outside of your apartment, which if you're a New Yorker, you've probably experienced this during construction. If you're not a New Yorker, then I think you're very lucky to not experience this very particular sound that's very unique. Was there sort of like a light bulb moment when you heard a sound and you were like, oh, I correlate this in some way?
Well, the whole opening of the piece is just these repeated notes with the harmonics. Ian and Russell have their fingers on the strings, holding different notes that produce harmonics. And I'm remembering this correctly, right? Laura and Ning are playing the keys, right? Are you also have your fingers on the strings too? I think
it's a 4-way canon at the beginning.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And are you and so there's just this like repeated. It just starts out with this repeated pulse that is shifting. It's industrial, and the harmonics are shifting on every beat, I think, and it's it's kind of that sound, the sound of this kind of banging away, outside, and this noise that's out there all the time. And yeah, I mean, I think when we started working on the inside of the piano, I mean, the inside of the piano is like, it's like the unexplored universe or something. It's like being on the Starship Enterprise or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's really, we only just, got the very, the introduction, the 101 kind of lesson of the inside of the piano. But once you start hearing what that sounds like, and you start hearing the overtones and drumsticks on the strings, and it's really, you're in a completely different world. And it's it's a fascinating place to it's like you're just in a big junkyard kind of that's been organized in this very beautiful way.
And I think we have an excerpt from the piece. This piece is about 75 to 80 minutes long. It's a very evening length piece. And so I think we're gonna have a couple excerpts, the first of which we're gonna play right now, which is about 10 minutes into the piece, which sort of describes this situation that Michael's mentioning about the repeated sound that sort of has a pile driver element to it. Let's take a listen. So we got 2 excerpts there actually. To our producer very slickly covered up a small technical problem. We give him. It was very impressive to see him rushing to fix the problem in the span of the clip. So good job.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, that was
Thanks, Rob.
very impressive. I wish you all could have seen it. Super good. But in the first clip, I mean, yeah, that's exactly in my mind the sound of a pile driver. That's this giant piece of steel just being hammered over and over again, just having those sounds. It's just so evocative of that very particular sound. I'm curious if whenever there are sort of concrete relationships to abstract pieces, I always wonder if it is in people's minds something that is recreated, sort of like in a concrete electronic music sound where they would actually play the sound of the pile driver versus reproducing the sound through an acoustic technique like something like Lachenmann would do, which would sort of expand beyond the boundaries but be evocative of this different idea. And I wonder for either Michael or the musicians themselves, if there is a correlation in your brain when you're actually hearing these sounds. Or is it just more of an abstract thing? Like, oh, I don't actually imagine this particular thing. I'm just focused on playing the music.
I think there was I don't know if I ever made the exact correlation between pile driver and sound, but I think I might have thought of myself executing the part in a more machine-like manner, just like the rhythmic precision that like a pile driver brings to its job. Yeah. But I don't know. That's only like a backwards reflection.
Yeah.
So.
No. But in the moment, it's certainly not something you're consciously thinking of.
Probably more counting.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
That is funny. It is a backwards reflection. You're right, Ian. And like Argeo, your question now, it's like now I think the next time we play it, I will think of that. Or at least I'll think of your question, because like
Right.
you're not like when you're playing, it's like Ian said, it's just like you're going, you're not like thinking of driving the thing,
driving the steel. And Michael, for you, is whenever this spark happens to you, is it something that is just a representation that is evocative for the audience to sort of read and sort of make a connection to, or in your brain, is it something that you are recreating in some way?
Yeah, it's I'm definitely not trying to recreate a construction site in a pile driver. So just maybe some way to attach this sound world to something that someone could conjure up, give someone, because what do you say about this type of very industrial sound? I was sitting by the lake and I saw these beautiful birds and I thought of this sound. It's not really. So it's really an urban experience in a certain sense, and we live with noise here. It's an incredible. If you get up early and you start to work on music, at 5 a.m, it's quiet. And at 6, it's louder, and at 7, okay, we're now in pandemic New York, but normally at a certain point in the day, you realize I'm walking around with this constant roar as the background, as a soundtrack to my life. Whatever I do, there's this noise, and if you have construction across the street, it's just amplified. And I think it's something people, they understand, okay, we're delving into a different sound world here.
Interesting. I remember when you were speaking, it made me remember a biography about Ravel that I read. And, sort of Ravel, the composer, Maurice Ravel, living at the beginning part of the 20th century, sort of in this very industrial era that was starting to really ramp up in production. And he apparently wrote that he really loved the sound of a steel mill. and that he used to go to seek out these particular sounds that, you know, just couldn't be recreated by the instruments that he had control over. And he even said that he heard the cutting of metal once that just made him weep. And so I think there is an interesting sort of correlation between sort of the concrete world that we inhabit and sort of this artificial musical world that we're sort of, you know, existing in, and the limitations between what we can create and what we can perceive. It's an idle thought. I wanted to talk a little bit about the score itself. It was mentioned earlier that it's in sort of these fragments and these sort of slips of paper. And I think we have a couple excerpts from this. Maybe we can pull up. And I'm just wondering if someone can sort of give me a clue as to what's going on.
Yeah, that's mine.
That's your score right there.
That's
Yeah, I've
mine.
never seen that. I'm like, what is it?
Yeah.
Well,
What piece is
I'd
that?
like a copy of that, please. At some point.
Well, I think Michael actually had printed out, you know, music for us for all of these different sections of the piece. I think we hadn't quite decided what order they would be in when we were getting close to the performance, the premiere still. And I also, because of, you know, we're all in the piano and we need to look at each other and people want to see what's happening inside the piano, we wanted to keep our music to a minimum. You know, the ideal eventually being ostensibly in a piece like this, it would be best if you could play from memory, right? But it was new enough that we needed something to look at. And so I made this sort of shorthand transcription for myself. So I would know the pitches, and we had these sort of phasing, you know, opposing swells in one hand that were at odds with the other hand. And so I just wanted to remember how long that happened in each pitch grouping. And, you know, it was a little roadmap for myself that took Michael's score and just shrank it a little bit for my own eyes.
And was that something that you wrote? Those are actually things you wrote, Laura, on that paper, or?
That's all my handwriting, yeah.
That's all your handwriting, yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, interesting. I think we have a second one. I think that one's pretty good. I thought that was pretty funny. We can check out the next one too. Oh yeah, and then there's
That
this
one's
one.
mine.
That one's yours.
Can't read it. The handwriting is terrible, but it's similar kind of. This is Russell. Similar kind of swells, and I think it's the number of beats per swell in the counting system that I was using that would work with everyone. And then it looks like I said what we do in each section.
And then you have an indication, go bow string.
Really? That's good.
Yeah,
At the bottom there. Yeah.
Yeah, but what I like about that is the part that's crossed out. You know, right?
Yeah.
Oh, just a note about the score. I've been working a little bit with Adrian Knight to kind of like transcribe it. And he had a question about what that was, Russell, in your part. And in the video, I think it was, you had to move physically from your station on the far side of the piano to the upper register around the back to go bow a bass string.
That's right.
So you couldn't play that last part. So it was.
Yeah, it just told me to go.
Yeah.
Right.
Just like, don't play
Yeah.
it.
For people who were just seeing the clips, the piano was on the ground, you know, and the audience, the people listening to it were on risers on all four sides. So the piano top was off, the piano's in the middle, everyone's higher than the piano looking down at the piano. There was really, because of all the playing inside the piano, there really wasn't a location to put music stands and things like that. So everything is, you know, was written out in a shorthand, as you see. And I think Russell and Ian, for the most part, just laid their music inside the piano on strings that weren't being played. Yeah.
And
I really like your, I think you once described it, Michael, as like a operating theater. Like
yes, like an
turn of the century.
Right, exactly, right.
Yeah.
Like everyone looking at the operation taking place on the piano, something like that.
Yeah.
That's a nice image.
That is a nice image. When I see a score like that, I usually think that there's a lot of flexibility involved in it. Is that not the case, or no? Laura says no.
Mm-mm.
So everything is extremely, like the duration of the piece, the duration of each of the sections is very fixed. And like if you did the piece 3 times in a row, it would always be more or less the same.
There's
like
that pipe
2 or
section.
3 sections that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Russell, go ahead.
No, I'm saying the exact same thing you were. There's like a couple sections, like the pipes where they're hanging.
Could you explain that?
Yeah. So there's a moment in the piece where we leave the piano and go and walk around, and there's these pipes hanging around, and we play those pipes, and
like you're talking, they're like long like tubular bell almost.
Conduit pipes. Actually, I think we might have used 1 or 2 from Nathan Davis's piece that he wrote for us, and we talked about a while ago. We grabbed what we had in the studio, and then that section was flexible, but everything else, to be honest, was some of the most like you have to focus and count the exact number of things type of music that we've had to play. Like if it doesn't line up, we're in trouble. Like rhythmically and just formally, it has to work out. So that's how I remember it, at least.
Yeah, there was in between, I think maybe 5 or 6 sections, there was a kind of a loose theatricalness about the piece where the members of the group at one point picked up instruments and went around and played very close to the listeners. I think in one case, someone had a large pair of cymbals, these types of cymbals, and went up to people and struck them and then held them by their ears. So
but not a huge crash. Not a
huge crash. No, not that type of thing. No, yeah, you're right.
Gentle.
Very gentle, very quiet. Just kind of, and maybe there was a point. I think Ning had to throw the cymbals on the floor. It had to be practiced quite, vigorously, because there's a place where she takes these cymbals where she just tosses them and they crash. But in between these very intense moments of focus and very concentrated music that's as everyone's saying, it was pretty inflexible. There was this kind of loose, kind of theatrical element, and we should say that the set, which was how the piano was placed, the lighting, how the audience sat was designed by Jim Finley, who also made an appearance during the piece.
Right.
I don't think is on the documentary video. Right.
It's what a moment.
Yeah, it's a really great moment. There's this moment, I think, I can't remember, but he just comes out and sits at the piano. At that point, Ning and Laura are somewhere else, I think, and he just comes and sits quietly at the piano for about a minute and then walks off stage. So.
Oh, yeah, no, that is in the documentation. That was one of my questions. I was like, who's the 5th member of the band?
Yeah. He just showed up.
Just to sit there?
Yeah, just every performance, some random dude. No.
I had assumed that it was someone sitting to hold the pedal down, because everyone else seemed occupied doing other things. But it was like, you needed a pedal.
Did he hold the pedal down?
I don't think so.
No, he just sat there.
Interesting. This brings up sort of an interesting question, which is, sort of Ning, who's typically the pianist in the group, or one of the pianists in the group, picking up percussion instruments and playing them. I know, Ian, in some other pieces, you've played keyboard instruments, you've played, pump organ or something like this.
Right.
That the boundary between the roles of pianist and percussionist in a lot of the work that you've commissioned is very flexible. And in this one, it seems like the roles in general are very fluid, where, a lot of times everyone will be on the inside of the piano doing things. Sometimes the pianist will actually be touching the keys, but not all the time. Everyone hits things at some point. I wonder, Michael, do you really think of the piece as being specifically a 2 piano, 2 percussion piece, or is it just sort of 4 performers that are sort of floating between these different identities?
Right, that's a good question, and I think that was the question I was thinking about today, and I'm not sure that, there's an answer, but as I was thinking about it, as just to prepare a little bit for this talk, I was wondering whether what's odd here, is it the pianist, and I was thinking, it's like that I felt the need to like have the pianist do this, and maybe that's the place where if I were, working on the piece today, I would be thinking about it differently, and I would be thinking more that there were 4 musicians or 4 performers doing this piece, as opposed to 2 pianists and 2 percussionists.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting. That's an interesting line there, and there's no real answer for it. I mean, I don't know. We tend to think of ourselves as, oh, I play this instrument or I play that instrument, but we really just are musicians, right?
Mm-hmm. As a historian, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Michael. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask Laura: is the piano part pianistic? Like, could a non-pianist play? I can't remember what you do. No,
what do you
know
do?
what you do. What do you do?
What's your role in the group?
I would say, yeah, I think it is. They're like the parts of it that are the most playing intensive. I think, I could imagine. I mean, for example, Russell has really great piano skills, right? He would probably, I'm not sure if he would call himself a pianist, but he knows his way around the instrument. He studied it formally at some point in his past. And
working on Hannon here.
But I think there is something in this sort of the split between left hand and right hand that is, even for a percussionist, might be tricky to maneuver. Like the tiniest of like those tiny muscles that pianists have in our forearms, that might be tricky. So I do think in that sense, yeah, while it's not pianistic in the sense of the like romantic flourishes, I think it is suited best for a pianist.
Yeah,
I would agree. I mean, like, I don't have. Thank you for your comment, but no, I'm not a pianist, and like those any small motions, like I don't have those muscles, right? And like the duration of the piece requires that you are in shape, and a pianist who knows how to do those things and play dynamics. I could probably play it like mezzo forte the entire piece, but like I would not have those swells, It really wouldn't be music. So I think it's the piano part for sure.
Like if I was teaching a class on your music, Michael, and I was trying to make a conclusion on my own, I would sort of draw a connection between sort of the series of works that you've been following over the past few years, which is, I don't know how you and I've talked about it before, but they're like multiples pieces where it'll be, 6 percussion all playing the same instrument. It'll be 7 bassoons all playing the same bassoon, multiple electric guitars, multiple voices, all these very homogeneous sounding instruments, and this complex sort of like spectral components that kind of come with like these little variations in identical things. And then as this is just sort of one instrument, and with sort of infinite spectral components contained within it, I would sort of see there being like some type of evolution kind of following that path. Does that sound totally off base?
No, I mean, I think the difference here is that with all those pieces with multiple instruments, and I want to say that I've got a new one called 8. It's just the number 8 that I wrote for Cello Octet Amsterdam.
Oh, nice.
For eight cellos. which is really I'm really excited about, because every time I write one of these pieces, I learn how to do at least one more thing or one new thing that I didn't know. And in this case, the multiple those pieces are partly about the sound traveling. And we're so used to, I mean, we're now so locked into this these headphones, and we connect to the world through headphones now. And even if you're listening to a concert of live music, and the players are on a stage, the music is coming at you. If it's amplified, which I've written of course a lot of music that's amplified, there are two speaker systems, and they're coming at you. And I think with timbre, which was mentioned earlier, I just started on this idea that there are really points that you can hear. We have this kind of perspective of hearing sound that is almost like the perspective in painting. When you think of very early medieval painting, or you think of Giotto or something like that, and where that's coming from. The movement in painting over hundreds of years is from this very flat surface to being able to have a feeling of dimension and perspective. And we really, although there is some kind of, there's that's naturally built in to music, right? There is a perspective. We're kind of at the very beginning when we think about, well, where's the sound coming from, and what is the, what does that canvas look like? Can sound come from there and there and there, all at the same time at, maybe different speeds or volumes, or, is that place that I'm hearing from this big place, this big field, this big palette, or is it just 2 points, right? Mm-hmm. And over the last 20, 30 years, right, thanks to all this great technology, it's more and more just these 2 points. And I think with these multiple pieces, we're talking about that perspective, how deep, how far left and right, and what happens, is perspective material, actually, is being able to hear from one point or another point. Is that actually material? Now, talking about this material, this piece, I don't really have that perspective, right? Because the instrument is really in one place, and although and the sound is basically generated from one place. So that's the difference, I think between this and those other pieces. And this piece, I really, as a composer, I really felt, I felt and still feel, like it's very shaky ground, like when we're talking about, we're not sure even how to recreate it, or what we did, or what happened in this experiment. And I'm so happy that we have this great documentation of the performance. And the person who did that, I don't know who it was, but we should give them a shout out. They did such a great job, and that's basically what we have right now. And I've been thinking also, well, how do you? People have called me and said we want to play it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what a headache! I don't know how to how to send you a score. So that's kind of what I've been dealing with lately.
Well, and
just send the video. Do this.
Just do this.
Right. I don't think they'd be able to do this and send Laura's.
Yeah. Well, the one impossible part.
Figure it out.
The last section with the the super hyper specific harmonics,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that would be impossible to figure out without like a direction.
Without the key. Yeah.
And I think, Russell, you were the one marking those harmonics, right? You might want to talk about.
Yeah, I have to
those wanting
remember. Yeah, I used some color coding system that really worked out well for this one, because with all the lighting and everything, I had to be able to see what I was doing. And so I think I used a combination of string and stickers so that I could see where I would place it. But yeah, that took a while to develop and see what was going to work.
Is that the part with where Ning is strumming as well? And you guys are doing sort of the unisons? Because I think we have a video clip of that. Let's see if this is the clip of what you're referring to. Let's check it out. It's number 2.
Yes, that's the section. So what I'm doing is Ian is activating the low strings, like
Sure.
and by hammering them, and I'm placing the harmonics to get the pitches. That's what I remember. And then like occasionally you would hit the cymbal that you had inside there.
I think Laura's playing one note on the piano.
Right.
Right.
What were you?
I think I'm just
okay.
playing the cymbal and
Maybe
like
you're just playing the cymbal.
another string, maybe.
Okay. I don't know who's playing. I'm marking someone's harmonics.
Right.
Who's activating
I guess
the
it doesn't
string.
matter to you. You're just
Okay,
on
Laura.
a string. Yeah.
I'm doing Laura's string, and then Ning, her melody comes out by doing like the cowl, like Aeolian harp type of thing, where she presses the keys down on the keyboard and strums them. And since the pedal is not down, then only the keys that she's depressed will sound. I love that section.
Yeah, super cool sound. And that sort of like begs a question for me that I've sort of been trying to figure out. So, and for those of you at home that want to hear this piece, I'm sure if you Google Michael Gordon material yarn wire, you will be able to find the documentation of this piece in its entirety. But this has only been done once. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And what is confusing to me is like, I think the piece is very good. I think all of you are very good as well. So what is it about, you have a compelling piece with high profile performers, high profile composer, has been done once in 5 years. What is why?
I don't know. Our email inbox is open.
No, there's a little trick with the piano. That's a very nice piano they're playing on. I don't know what the value of a 9-foot Steinway D is, but there aren't a lot of people that want to invite you over to do that kind of torturous activity on their piano. I'm not sure that we told the owners of that piano that you played on exactly what it was being used for. I think
I
was that
think it was
the Miller's Theater's
that was
piano?
Miller.
It was.
Yeah,
Okay, good.
Melissa's.
Okay,
Yeah,
They
she
knew
was
what they
done.
were in for.
it was good. So they're not
Yeah.
coming after us now, right?
No.
Okay.
But I think you're right, Michael. I think that it is true, and we always try to be really upfront with people when we're going to play a concert. Saying this is the program we'd like to do, and here are the techniques that we use inside the piano. So if that's a problem, please let us know, and we'll do something different. But with a piece like this, that is the whole concert. So if someone is not comfortable with that, then that's kind of it.
Laura, where would you put the stuff on the range of things we've done on the inside of the piano before? Where would you range this? Because to my mind, if people don't like oils on the strings, that's one thing. This piece is like out. Most of our repertoire may be out. But like in terms of the other stuff, where does this fall, honestly?
I mean, in my opinion, I actually don't think that we do anything that is more damaging to the mechanisms of the piano than simply playing, Liszt sonata, which is a 30-minute long work where every string of the piano almost gets destroyed by the pianist. It's a very taxing work. So all of that is to say, in my learning and training and working with piano technicians, piano is actually a very, very strong instrument that can live up to a lot. And even with extended techniques, there are really only a few things that are damaging to the instrument. Like some of John Cage's preparations are not good. That's not something you should do to a $200,000 concert instrument. But if you know what you're doing, if you've been trained in how to play using extended techniques, and you don't touch those beautiful, precious dampers, then there's really not a lot that can truly, truly damage the instrument. So I would put this in the scale of in the lower third of damaging things, honestly. It's that we definitely play things that are a lot more potentially damaging than this.
But it sounds intense. It sounds like an 11.
I'm disappointed.
I was thinking actually, I mean, because it's like constantly inside the piano, right? There's always someone hitting a string, touching a string, pressing on it. And I was actually wondering, especially with the lower strings, is there a danger of them, they're under incredible tension, and loosening and causing catastrophic damage to the people at the end of the piano, the percussionists?
I never considered it, but
well, yeah, I mean, because it's only held in by it's coiled, right? It's just and then as you hit it.
But the piano hammer itself hits it. Right?
Do you think that you're hitting it as hard as a piano, or not as hard, or as a hammer, or not as hard? Are you exerting more pressure?
Yeah, we have to balance. So if we played too loud, I would get a stare from Laura and Ning. And we would have to balance our voices. I mean, it's true though. We can't play louder than the hammers can play, or else it won't sound like the piece.
Yeah. And I would just also add that those high strings are typically the only ones that break on a piano, because those are really under a lot of tension. The low ones, if you pluck it, you can see they're pretty loose. Mm-hmm. So I think, yeah, probably actually what Russell's doing, the little rolls that you do on those higher strings, but they're very soft, like you said, because you don't want to overbalance what the piano is doing.
And then so damaging the potential damage to a piano in terms of a presenter's perspective is something that would maybe limit possibilities in their eyes. the audience seating, because it's seated around, is also quite limited as well. Is there a version of this piece that exists in a more standard orientation where you could have, more than, what is it, like 50 people, something like this, 75 people at max? Is there a version of this that, has a more traditional setup, or is the physical constraints of the piece part of the experience itself?
It could be done. It could be done in a bigger hall. I just think that the piano has to be at the bottom, and it has to be this tiered stadium type of seating. I mean, I don't know if anyone knows. It's never been, configured in this way. But Zankel Hall has the ability to be set up in the round with the, this every part of the hall is on. And it can be lifted and lowered. And so I've always imagined that someday in the future, they're going to reconfigure the hall, and for this piece, so,
Sounds like a good effort. Sounds like a good opportunity.
Yeah, I think everyone's into it.
We're available.
Okay. I don't know. There are other places like that. So I don't think it's a question of limiting seats, but it's just a question of you really have to be looking down into the piano because it is theatrical. And I think that's why the piece extends out into the audience, because it is theater. Playing instruments is theater. And it's a big part of this piece. Now, Argeo, I wanna say that when you led that whole, the whole thing about, why isn't this being done? I thought you were going to ask another question, and I just want to point this out, that about the possibilities of the piano. That in that last clip, when Russell is playing the putting his fingers on the string, on the nodes, those are overtones, and that's different tuning than when you hit the keys. So when Ning is actually playing the same tune, and it's interesting because I'm just pointing this out because we think of piano as the big equal tempered instrument. It's basically why we have equal temperament today, right? Is because the British Empire shipped equal tempered pianos all over the world. But inside the piano, it's not equal tempered at all. So it's kind of, when you think about those possibilities, it's really mind blowing in a certain way.
That's a good point.
Yeah, the harmonic section that I was actually thinking of before was when, I don't know what note is the resultant pitch, but I think Laura and Ning you're playing like, I don't know, 7 or 8 strings, but Russell and I are finding like the equivalent harmonic on all of them, but they're all slightly, they're not tempered. They're all slightly different. And it creates this like beautiful, it's almost like 7 harps playing, slightly detuned unison. And it's an amazing sound.
I wanted to point out one thing about the theater element. Like from my perspective as a performer, it's really hard to envision anything other than people like, I don't know, 6 feet away from me, like surrounding the performance. I've never had that kind of like intimacy in a new music performance personally, and having, the stage was black, the lighting was real dramatic. And there was this sense of like, I could feel everyone there in a way that you wouldn't feel from a proscenium type setting, and it was kind of, raised and up. And I really felt like I was performing this piece in a much different way, in a much more theatrical way, even though, you don't see faces and we're not like flourishing or anything. Like it felt like a performance like that, almost like a surgery, like we were talking about over a body in those old, I don't know, 16th century or whatever paintings, very macabre, but you feel that. And thinking about a larger space, I would be so curious to feel what that would be like, what the difference would be. But in my mind, it's like the intensity part of it comes from the closeness with the audience.
Absolutely.
Well, I hope there is an opportunity when concerts are a thing that happen again, that we'll be able to hear this piece sometime in the near future. It would be, I think, a really good experience, especially sort of bringing everyone around something almost like a campfire, sort of sitting around together. And so I want to thank everyone so much for their time today. I don't want to go too long, and I'll toss it back to Laura to take us away.
Nope.
Laura, you're muted.
Laura's sound is gone.
Oh.
Sorry.
There you are.
It's because I was having this very New York City experience of my upstairs neighbor vacuuming, so I had muted myself to avoid derailing the conversation. But yes, as I wanted to say, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Argeo. It's been such a treat to revisit this piece, and I will definitely add my voice to the chorus and say I really hope that we do get a chance to reconstruct it. Really had a lot of good memories thinking about putting this piece together and performing it. So thank you both. And thanks to all of you watching. If you want to join us for our next episode of Feedback, come back Thursday next week on February 18th. We'll be chatting with Tristan Parrish and the wonderful Leslie Flanagan about chalk. So remember to subscribe to our channel. That way you won't miss an episode. And if you'd like to support this project, check us out on patreon.com, where you can support the show in exchange for lots of cool benefits. And if you become a Patreon supporter, we are doing a special patrons only talk back, a coffee hour, if you will, with some of our past feedback guests, Alex Minchak, Natasha Deals, and Eric Webbles on Friday, March 5th at 3 p.m. So don't miss it, become a supporter, and hear even more from some of our most requested composers. So with that, thanks for watching, and we'll see you all again soon.
See ya.